Okay, so welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at Davinci Resolve 10. This is the Lite version. Obviously, if you've paid for the upgraded version, lucky you. But I'm just going to look at the Lite version today. And what we're going to look at is our setup, so how we set it up, our preferences, how we can work with them. Then we'll look at the media, so adding media, then move on to working with EDLs or XMLs, depending on what you're working with. And then we're going to do some very quick color and what options there are for coloring. And then hopefully that's done. So I'm hoping maybe about 30 or 40 minutes, hopefully. So let's just get started anyway. So Davinci Resolve 10, let's just open this up. Obviously I'm working with a PC on this. You can work with Mac or whatever, and then it's going to load and it's going to work as quick as your computer can do. So obviously a little slow today. Maybe it's the weather, who knows. Okay, so Davinci Resolve, there we go. Okay, so it's failed, whatever. Doesn't matter. So what we've got is some options to log in or set up. So if you need to set up an account, just go in, set it up. It's very easy. It's not rocket science. Then just log in. So I'm going to go in as my administrator, which is just easy. So just hit login. And then we have some projects. Obviously, if you've got nothing on here, then you have to go to the bottom left corner where it says new project and just click and add a project. So let's just call this one tutorial 2. And then we create and hit create. There's tutorial 2, so there's our time code and our size is set up. New folder, if you want to open or make a new folder, then you can make a new folder, but in this case we're just going to work with the project. So we just hit open. And there it is, welcome to Davinci. So this is the media section of Davinci, and in here we can see our library. We've got a video playback, an audio playback, our metadata, and then our master media pool. So I would assume if you're new to Davinci and you've not used it before, all of this library is going to be empty. So what you need to do in order to get some library is go into Davinci Preferences, and in your preferences you have a few options, but we'll look at media storage. So in our media storage, just hit the plus, go to your computer, and then just select the drive and hit choose, and it will pop up on here. So for example, I'll hit the J drive and I'll choose it, and there it is, it's there. So when I save this, it's going to tell me that my preferences have been updated and they will work next time Resolve is started. So I'll just hit OK. So what you need to do now is restart Davinci Resolve, and then it will pop up here with your drive. Okay, so I'm not going to restart Davinci because I'm just going to crack on. So once we've done that and we're happy with that, what we need to do is find our content. So in my wonderful example that I'm going to be using, I have a content in here where I've got several files that I'm going to work with. Okay, so here's some of them in here, which is good. So all you have to do to click on it and you'll be able to see it. You can scrub through, you can play back, you can scrub through here and see it all. There it is. This was all shot on Canon C300. This was a blue screen interview, and you can see a little bit yellow, and you know, it's the white balance is a bit off, but that doesn't matter. We're not going to grade this one anyway. But because when I was editing the project and I export my XML or my EDL, obviously this is in that EDL. So if I don't add this to my media pool, it's going to show me in my edit section that this is an offline clip. So for the sake of showing them all online, I'm going to add as many as I believe are in my media and my EDL. So I just need to right click on the, or if I want to Control obviously on the PC to select them. It would be, I guess, Command on the Mac. Right click, Control click on the Mac, and then add into media pool. Please, yes, change. Obviously, if you want to set up your frame rate to be slightly different, you can do that. That's no problem, that's easy enough. And I need to find my second batch, which would be in here. My other chunk of interviews, 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to add into my media pool, and there's all my, that should be all my interviews that I did for this. And again, you can see the white balance is very yellow in here. That was just because of the lighting. Don't worry, we're going to grade this later anyway. There's some other stuff in there, but at the moment that's all that's in my EDL. I haven't got anything else in my EDL. So that's how you add your media. So you just right click, add. There you go. Obviously you can do all these different ones, different options in here, extracting audio, add as a matte layer, etc, etc. But for this, we're just going to look at that. So that's our media, that's adding our media. If we click on this, we can see all our information. Obviously, if we imported stuff or we want to add stuff in here, we can say what it is, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, if all the metadata was coming from your camera, then it should automatically import into here. See, we can see there our information, when it was shot, time it was shot, channels, blah, 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 end of frames. So there's our information, and the same with this. So let's look at our edit page. Let's move along here to our edit page. Okay, so this is where we would need to pull in our EDL or our XML. So what we can do, if we go to File, we've got Import AAF, EDL, XML, etc. So we click that. Obviously just need to then find our EDL, which is here, look in there. So we've got an EDL, there's our EDL. This has come from Premiere, not from Final Cut. Obviously these XMLs probably come from Final Cut, but they might not match. So I'm going to work with this EDL. So I'm just going to hit open. It's going to give me this information. It's going to say the frame rate that's going on here. It's going to tell me time code, the name, source file, and the timeline, obviously the timeline name, which is fine. So I'm going to hit OK. And there we go, there's our EDL. So if I zoom out, I can zoom in, I can zoom out. Obviously all of these sections were text. So I had a piece of text just to, on my edit, just to tell me what they were talking about in the interview. I'm not going to work with the blue screen, I'm just going to work with this one initially. Let's just work with this one initially. About that. Okay, so this is how we can work. So I've got my EDL imported, all good, sorted, looking happy. So the next one, we've come into our color section. So Davinci works with nodes. What the hell is a node, I hear you ask? Well, this is a node. It's quite useful. It allows you to separate your coloring or grading into different sections or different areas that you want to concentrate on. So this obviously says no color correction because I've not done anything to it, but let's have a look. So what we've got is we can select what we want to work with on our timeline. This is coming from our EDL, information from our EDL. Let's just work with this one because it's easy. What else do we have? We have a little camera. This tells us our camera raw information. Obviously we don't have RAW. I'm not working with RAW because this is ProRes. If you have RAW, then you can select your different information. Color wheels, lift, gamma, gain. Lift is obviously blacks, gamma is midtones, gain is your whites or highlights. We can change this to our log so it actually says shadow, midtone, highlights. We're not fussed. If you want an offset color, we can offset a color, but we're not fussed at the moment. Curves. Curves, like a bit like Photoshop, we can work with curves. Red, green, and blue. We've got some options. We can work in hue versus hue, hue versus saturation, hue versus luma, or luma versus saturation. I would suggest you leave it at the custom layout. This is fine. The luminance, the red, green and blue, we'll deal with them later. We won't touch them for the moment. What else do we have? We have a picker or a qualifier, whatever we want to call it. This works with HSL, RGB or our luma. I would again suggest leave it at HSL. That's the easiest thing to leave it at. If we want to make some shapes, we'll talk about this in a minute. We can create some shapes in here. We can track movement. We can work with blurring. We can also sharpen. We can also mist, so add a kind of mist-y type effect. Not really mist, but soften, I suppose, soften-y kind of grey effect kind of onto it. Key, if we want to key stuff, then we can key stuff, but we're not going to. If we want to change the size, pan, tilt, zooms, etc., then we can do that in here. We don't have 3D. And then the final one on this is if we want to add any more information into our data, or if we want to import some information, we can do that all in here. So let's just go back to our color. Obviously, we can see the color doesn't look very great. It's quite yellow, a little red as well in there. So if I right click and I look at my show scopes, obviously probably this wouldn't come up. It would probably come up as a 4-up like this on yours, I would imagine. So your waveform, your histogram, your vector scope and parade. So obviously this is showing you your RGBs, red, green and blues, red, green, blue, red, green, blue. Now we can see there's some kind of white coloring kind of going into it. White is where we're creating a perfect black and white, or almost perfect black and white. I mean, you can see it's yellow in here. So, but you can see background stuff, there's blacks in here, and we can see there's blacks going on in here, but there's no real, there's a black glasses here. So if I was to stick my 1-up, let's go to 1-up. If I was to stick this over the top, we can almost see where the blacks are, where the reds are, if there's any greens and yellows and all of this kind of stuff. So what we first want to do is we want to create perfect blacks, perfect whites, and do just basic color correction. A really basic color correction. That's what we first want to do. So let's work with that first. So 0 is black and 1, 0, 2, 3, that is white. So if I move my lift and I move this wheel here and I move it up, alright, so this is off there. We can see it's gone grey. That's understandable because I'm moving my black. Yeah, I mean, we can see what we want is we want this line to effectively be along the 0. So let's just remove that back down by moving the wheel. Slowly does it to about there. Okay, so that means we've got some blacks to work with. And alternatively, if I take my gain and I move my gain down, we can see that, you know, there's a lot going on here. So we're just going to move it up. We're going to brighten the image up a little bit. That looks okay. I mean, it's a bit overshot in some of the areas. Like here, for example, we can see this is quite white. It's very bright, sorry. There's a lot of highlight in here. And here as well, there's a lot of highlight. So if we wanted to pull it down, then we can pull it down. And I'm quite happy with it about there anyway, so it's all good. So we've got perfect kind of blacks, perfect kind of whites, but it still looks yellow. So we can change the gamma and the gain. And what we work with this is opposites, effectively. So there's a lot of yellow in his skin tone. The piano is kind of yellow. His shirt's yellow. Everything's yellow, and a little red as well. We can see a little reddy yellow. So like reddy yellow is about here on our gamma. So if I start to pull this towards the blue, we can see it's starting to look a bit more natural and his skin tone starting to look a bit more natural. We can see here that maybe it's a bit too much green, so if we move it up, okay, it's a bit red, a bit too green. Let's pull it out. Let's work as well with the gain. Okay, well, that's looking okay. So now we've pulled it out and it's gone really blue, which we can see has affected all of this, but according to the color correction, this is not too bad. Personally, my eyesight, I can see, I mean, it looks a bit blue anyway. However, don't worry about it. We're going to work with this as a first kind of cut. So I'm going to move it back a little bit. And I'm happy there's a lot of white going through this now. We can see a lot of white here. That means we've got some good blacks and some good whites, and they're kind of matching, which is ideally what we want. Let's close our waveform. Okay, so there's our node 1 done. Excellent. If I hit or go to nodes, add serial node, so Alt S is add serial node if you want a shortcut key. Alt S, okay, there's our serial node number 1. Okay, so this is moved to the next node. What I want to do is work out how many nodes that I'm going to work with before I start doing anything. This I found is a bit easier than doing a color correction, add another node. If I just do it all the nodes first, then I'll just come back and figure it out. So I want to deal with his face. This is going to be my face. So I'm going to call this face. I also want to create an outside node. Yeah, so this is face, but I want to create an outside node. I'm going to do that later. So I'm not going to do that first. So the way nodes work is node 1, node 2. We need to create a third node. So, excuse me. So we're going to work with a parallel node, which is all P. Okay, so we can see that it's created a parallel node. Okay, you can see what's happened there. So it's dropped these two together and it's created this. So this parallel node could, for example, I could work on his shirt, which is probably what I'm going to do. And then this would be my final node. So then this node is going to be my contrast. So then I need to create one more node which will become my final node. So Alt and S. Oops, sorry, I was in the wrong node. So this one, Alt and S. Now this has become my very last node. So let's call this, oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. So these two are coming together. So this is a kind of like in-between node. This one I'm going to call my contrast. Okay, and this one I'm going to rename and call my shirt. This is an in-between node. I don't really want to touch this node and do much with it. This is my contrast, and then after that, this is my final. Let's just call this final. Yeah, so if I want any final grading, I'm going to go in there and do some final gradings. Okay, so we've got our nodes. Obviously, I do need to create one more node in here, which would be my outside node, which I will get to in a minute, because I don't want to do that at the moment yet. So I've done a first basic color correction, which we can obviously put in here, just call this basic. I'm going to go into my face. So now I'm going to work with my face. So what we can do, which is really great in DaVinci, is we can work with our qualifier. Now, there's a couple of ways we can work with our qualifier. We can do it manually with these three. So our hue, our saturation, and our luma. Or we can do it a little bit automatically, I suppose, is the easiest way of saying it. So we can see here the highlight, it says highlight. So if we select the highlight, this is going to show us what we're selecting. See, we've got a little color picker. Now I'm working with his skin tone. So we've got this much space. Now the skin tone's kind of the similar sort of color as well to this. So don't be afraid when you click some skin tone, and if there's other colors that are kind of similar, it will probably highlight them. So if I click it, yeah, I mean at the moment it's good, but if I was to click, for example, here, we can see this is starting to peel off, which is fine because it's not a big problem. Now what we can do is we can either manually select all of this, So by moving our center points and our width, so for example like this, yeah, so we can move our left and right, and we can select however we want it to be selected to cover his face. We can then move up our saturation, so if we want to include more saturation, and again if we want to include more highlight, like this with our manual. We can also do it like a little bit non-manually, automatically, by using these color ranges and softness, but I think it's probably easier if you do it yourself, because you could just use your eye rather than just randomly kind of click, 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 click. It might look a bit funny. Let's take that down a little bit as well. So I'm not fussed about his eyeballs. I'm not interested in this. His eyebrows as well, I don't really care. And obviously his teeth area, not fussed. I'm looking at his skin tone. So I'm quite happy with the skin tone. I know this is covering as well, but we're going to move on and we're going to make some shapes next. So once you've got your skin tone happily selected and you're happy with it, we can move on to our third window, called Window. It's a very original name. We've got some presets, but we're not going to work with presets, we're just going to make our own. So we can see on, shape, invert, mask. If we hit on, we can see what's come up. We've got transform, we've got softness. So what we can do is just go into here and start clicking around our face. Make a little dot there. Look here, so we'll just click, 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 click. Clickety click, and the last click on there to join them up. Now we've got that. See, all of this background now has gone, which is very nice. We want to create an inside. So this is just a manual looking dot. So if we create an inside and I moved it, see what happens. We create pink. Inside. We'll create an outside, about sort of a little less, maybe 2.3, 2.5 looks pretty good. Let's just take this down to 7. 7 looks good. Okay, looking very nice. Let's soften it. Maybe a little. If we soften it, we'll see. You can see what happens. It kind of softens either side of the inside outside. So maybe we'll soften to about 7.5. We can manually put that in. Okay, looks fine, looks good. We've got no problems with this. We can zoom in. Yeah, looks alright, looks pretty good. Quite happy with that face. Now, obviously, if I now scrub through this, we can see that he's moving a bit. So for example, you know, here, he's completely out of the shot. Almost half his face is kind of out of the shot. So what's really great in DaVinci is if we move on to our next one that's called Tracker, it's very simple. We can analyze how much he moves, because we've got this dot in the middle that is saying this is kind of the center point of what we're looking at. Now we know that the camera is not really doing much, it doesn't zoom, so let's just kill the zoom, so we don't need that, but leave the pan, tilt, rotate, and then just hit the forward and it will start tracking his face, and you can see it moving as it tracks. And DaVinci actually does a really nice job usually of tracking these objects or faces or whatever you're using to track. And there we go, that's all done, very good. I always like DaVinci when it tracks, it seems to do a really good job. Much better than Final Cut Color does. I mean, it's not been updated and stuff, but anyway, if you want to add keyframes yourself, you can go in and add some keyframes. I don't need to, it's fine. If you want to then do the betweens, you can add those as well. They're called betweens, so it's just keyframes. So if you want to add your own keyframes, if you want to set points, delete points, if you want to insert anything and make it a bit like start working with it a little more than what's being tracked, you can. It's an option for you to look at. I'm happy with this track. I don't need it to do anything else. It's fine. So now I can go back into my color corrector, and maybe I want his face to be a little bit warmer because we know the background's a little cold. So maybe I want his skin tones, midtones, to be a bit more yellow. So I will just pull in a bit more yellow, not too much, else he's going to start looking like an Oompa Loompa. Okay, that looks better. He looks nice and warm, a little warmer skin tone. Maybe I can do the same on my gain, so my whites, just add a little bit, tiny bit of yellow in there. Okay, so his skin tones look pretty good. Quite happy with that. So what I can then do is, because I work with the inside of this, is I can right click and I can make an outside node. So this will work with everything outside of this shape that I've made. So if I click that, and we can see he comes up looking all strange, because this is my inside. Everything on the outside obviously is outside of my face that I've just worked with. So maybe on my outside, perhaps I want to make my contrast, add a little contrast perhaps. Maybe I want to add a bit of blue into this, maybe. So maybe we'll pull a bit of lift into the blue, make it a touch bluer, so it just brings out his skin tones a little more. And maybe we'll just add a tiny bit of contrast. It looks pretty good. And check this, so he's looking good in there. So then if we look at our next one and go to here, this would be our final kind of shot. Looks quite nice. I'm quite happy with that. Looks pretty good. There's our final one. So we can go in here, and if we want to see it with and before and after, we can do Control D. So we can see what it looked like. So there it's quite warm, and they're kind of a bluey kind of tint to it, hasn't it? So it's got quite a bluey tint to it going on in there, which is cool. But I still want his shirt to be black. I mean, his hair looks pretty good. I'm happy with the black. I could always go in here and look at my scopes. Yeah, so there's a lot of actual black, but here we can see kind of missing some black going on in there. So it's not really black. It's kind of gone blue. This shirt's kind of gone a bluey kind of color, isn't it? So what I can then do, obviously, is I could go in here and I can make a shape, and I can do what I've just done with his face, but I can make the shirt, and I can work with his shirt when it lets me click. And we'll do the same, basically the same as what we've done. So there's my shape, very nice. We'll do the same here. Maybe we'll do a 5 inside, do a 5 outside. Oh, that's probably too much. Maybe a 2.5, maybe even a 1. Let's go with 2. Oh, looks okay. Looks pretty good. I'm alright with that. And let's soften, maybe a 2. Soften, that looks pretty good. And again, we need to work with our color. So we're going to just pick the black, which looks fine. That's what we're working with. Looks pretty good. There we go, something like that. We want to leave a little bit of this edge out, really. Maybe we can blur a little bit. See, if we blur it a little bit, we kind of lose the edging as well here. So we're going to shrink the blur down a bit. Maybe a radius blur in there. Okay, looks pretty good. Let's pull our radius up again. And maybe offset. We can offset a little bit as well, you see. Something like that. I mean, we could probably trim this edge bit if we go back to our shape. Trim that in. And the same here. And then let's go back, check that. Maybe this bit could be trimmed in a little bit tighter, but for this we're gonna not too fussed about it. So let's go to our mid-tone. Maybe let's just make it darker. Okay, nice. Add a little yellow. Okay, that looks a bit more like a natural. That's a bit, possibly a bit too yellow. I quite like that. Maybe make it a little darker as well in the lift. Okay, it looks quite nice. He's got a nice black shirt. Looks good. So that's our shirt done. We don't need to worry about the outside of that because we've dealt with that in here, in this one. There's our outside, so we could maybe, let's change the label and call this outside face so we know exactly what it is. Obviously this is our original, and then we're coming into here. So it looks pretty good. I'm happy with the shirt now. I like this blue. I might even push that a bit more blue. Potentially I could put a bit more blue into that. Maybe a bit less blue. Maybe we can make the background a little bit darker. Okay, and then let's have a look at that. Okay, not bad. Looking good. Looks pretty good. Maybe we could also blur it a little bit. So if I go into here, I can blur perhaps a little bit more, and the ratio a tiny bit. Okay, looks quite nice. Sorry, I don't want to be doing that. Don't want the key, so let's go there and let's check this. Okay, that looks a lot stronger. Looks quite nice. His shirt is a little bit blue now. So let's go in here and probably add a bit more yellow. So we know that this is yellow, but when we're going into here, that looks a bit better, doesn't it? I mean, it's a bit warmer shirt color. The piano is kind of cold, so he's standing out a lot more than the background is. Yeah, which is kind of what we want in interviews. So I quite like that. Skin tone is looking good. Let's go back to our original first grade. This is our first color correction grade. This is what the original looked like. Very yellow, not very interesting. Then we graded first just to color correct. Then we moved to the face. We yellowed, got a bit more warm. Then we pulled a lot of blue around the face, so to give it a bit more depth. Made the shirt a bit more yellow, because we wanted it to be a stronger black. Came into here and we obviously added a little bit of contrast. So what we could do in here, that I've said contrast, so let's add some contrast. Maybe we'll just make it a tad darker and do a kind of S. Whoa, not that much, because he's starting to look a bit funny looking. Maybe just a fraction contrast in there, and that looks, let's play it out and see what it looks like. So what we noticed there as well is this is kind of looking a bit funny here, isn't it? So let's go back to our shirt, because what we didn't do is we didn't put a tracker on. So let's analyze and track the movement, which is very useful, and we could probably pull out this edge as well. Let's move that once the tracker's finished, so it kills this bit here as well. Okay, that looks good. So we'll just pull that in to right on the corner sections, and that should do nicely. Maybe a little bit more, because we've got the inside outside kind of softness going off for us. So by just moving these a fraction, we can deal with, and obviously this isn't C-Log, so raw you'd have a lot more to play with. This is just ProRes, so we don't have the same amount to work with that we would in this. So let's take a look at that again. Let's play that out. See, we can still see again like this kind of shadow. So I mean, what we could do in that case, let's go back to this one, is go to our shirt, and maybe we just don't want to do anything with our shirt. Maybe we just remove the whole thing. Let's reset that. Let's reset these guys. So maybe we don't want to actually touch the shirt. Let's take a look at that. Oh, but now he's got a blue shirt. So, I mean, it depends on what you're looking for, I guess, for your grade. But, you know, you don't want this kind of fuzziness going on here. And that's also to do with the ProRes file. You know, RAW would have a lot more detail going on into it. So if we do want to go back into our shirt and we want to create in here, maybe we just want to add a tiny bit of yellow. And we're not losing the detail. Still, let's add a bit more, maybe yellow in the blacks. Okay, and let's see what it looks like. No, you see we're starting to get this kind of curvature going on in there, which we definitely don't want. So maybe a little bit more in the mid-tone, just a fraction. Okay, that looks alright, looks good. Not too bad, you know. It looks pretty good. It's a little bit cold, but it looks okay. And there we go. So then we can go into our final and have a look at that. And we can see what we've done. So I think what's really important with DaVinci is once you get into the coloring, you know, it's very subjective for what you want to create. You know, what kind of style are you going for? What are you trying to make? How do you want to use DaVinci to create a look that's your own kind of look for it? Obviously, you know, this was the original, so we can see it was very yellow and not looking very good. We did a basic correction, which looks flat, but the coloring looks fine, like in terms of a basic color correction. Then we moved on to the face, outside the face, did a little work on the shirt, and then a little bit of the contrast, pulled a little bit more contrast into it, and kind of gave it this kind of bluey tinge that's going on in this one here. So this is a bit of a bluey tinge going on. Pulled the contrast, the shirt looks pretty black, his hair is obviously very black. I mean, I remember his shirt wasn't pure black, but it doesn't matter because his glasses and his hair look good. And there we have it, and there's our final grade. So hopefully that has given you an idea of what you can do in DaVinci. I would really recommend trying to work with raw files because it's just going to give you way more depth when you come to your grading. You can also do kind of this in other color grading, color correction suites, but I think I've been using DaVinci for a little while now, still kind of getting to grips with it and everything that it can do, but it's really nice. It's quite simple once you actually get to understand what there is you can do with it, and it does way more than other grading software that I've worked with in the past. So I'm quite happy with what I've come to get with this grade in particular. Looks quite nice. Maybe could add some more contrast if I wanted to add some more contrast. Maybe make it a little bit darker, but no, I quite like it as it was. And there we go, there we have it. So that is a kind of quick-ish tutorial on DaVinci. I will try and do some more tutorials on DaVinci. This is kind of just an overall, here it is, check it out, try and use it, see what you want to do. And obviously you can create these looks. You can add in here, you can grab a still, which is very cool, and then I can go into this one and, you know, I can add the correction and it does it straight away. You know, I don't even need to think about playing with anything. It just copies the grade straight away into it, which is really cool. But obviously the lighting in this one was different to this one, and you know, the face is different to this. It's a bit brighter in the face, so maybe I'd pull down the highlights and play around. And obviously here, this is not the right shape, so I would have to go in here and change the shape. And again, the shirt is not correct, so I would have to then, you know, go in and change a few things. But overall, you know, basically overall, it does copy and paste everything to your clips, which is really great. You know, it makes it quicker for you to grade if you want to be speed grading. But personally, I prefer to take my time. And also monitors, you know, try and find a broadcasty color monitor, very useful. This is not, what I'm using is not proper, but you know, I can always look at my scopes in here and see what I'm working with, and it looks pretty good. I mean, there's a bit of red, quite a lot of red in there, but you know, that's kind of what I'm looking at anyway. I want that kind of feel to my work, you know, that's personal choice. So there, hopefully you have enjoyed the tutorial and it wasn't too long or too boring. There's some other great tutorials on DaVinci out there as well at the moment that I've looked at as myself. This is obviously hopefully quite useful for you, and enjoy playing with DaVinci. Okay, see you next time.